How can you use Bitcoin to build generational wealth? In this video, I want to go into this topic in depth. Let's get started. First of all, let's start with what exactly generational wealth is. This is from Investopedia. Generational wealth refers to financial assets passed from one generation of a family to another. These assets can be cash, stocks, bonds, real estate, family businesses, or something that they didn't include in this, Bitcoin. Wealth is just money that you save and you put into assets and you use those assets to pay for your lifestyle. So let's say you buy a house, that house is going to generate cash flow, or you can borrow money against it. You can borrow US dollars against it, and you can pay for your expenses using the cash flows from that house so that you don't have to work. Based on how much wealth you have, you're going to see the world a little bit differently. So, in the case of, let's say, groceries, at the lowest level, you might have difficulty with paying for groceries on a week to week basis. So, on that first level where you're living paycheck to paycheck, grocery prices matter a lot. When you see the price of something that you use on a regular basis going up by a dollar, $2, $3, it bothers you a lot because it impacts your budget. You have a certain amount of money, you're getting a fixed amount of money every single month, every single week, and an increase in your costs will completely change how you plan for the future. So what we see here is this is a chart from of dollars and data.com. You can see here from 10,000 to $100,000, grocery prices don't matter as much. So if you have some savings, you don't really have to worry about the $1 or $2 changes in prices on a day-to-day basis. If prices increase a little bit, you kind of understand that they're going to increase no matter what. And if you have 10,000 to $100,000, I mean, you don't really have to worry about the prices changing as much because you know that you have the money to pay for the things that you need to pay for. And worst case scenario, you'll find another way to generate more cash. As you go up this ladder, you can see here at $100,000, restaurant prices matter less. At $1 million, vacation prices matter less. At $10 million, home prices matter less. And $100 million, what are prices? I think this is really cool in showing you, depending on wherever you are on this ladder, you're going to see the world in a different way. What you could do by creating generational wealth is help your kids to start off at a higher level on this ladder. So, let's say, for example, instead of starting off below $10,000 and being worried about everything, maybe you could give them $50,000 and they don't have to worry about the basic necessities of life. Or let's say you give them $150,000. At that point, they have less to worry about and they can focus more on how they're going to change the world and create even more wealth for themselves and for future generations. If your goal is to create wealth, you have to follow a formula. And this formula in general is earn more, spend less, and invest the difference. You earn more because it increases your income, of course. You have more money to spend. You spend less because if you can slow down the outflow of money, it makes it much easier to find a gap that you can invest. So let's say you earn $10,000 a month and you spend $10,000 a month, you can't invest anything. Your goal isn't just to increase your income, it's also to find a way to cut your expenses so that you can put more money towards your investments. In the beginning of your wealth building journey, I think it's really important to figure a way out to spend less money, but you have to remember that the results of spending less are finite. Whereas if you figure out ways to earn more money, it may take longer, but the results are infinite. There's no limit to how much money you can make. And if you make more money, you can invest more and you can see a bigger asymmetrical return over the next few decades so that you can pass more wealth on to your kids. I built another spreadsheet here with some criteria that I want you to follow, and I'm going to show you an example of somebody building generational wealth with their Bitcoin. Your goal should be to move away from active sources of income to passive sources of income. Your goal should be to buy income with your active income. So let's say you work a job, maybe you put the income that you get into stocks, or you buy a rental property, or you buy some Bitcoin. Your goal should be to earn money even though you're not working. If you stop working, your portfolio will continue to work for you. That's how you create generational wealth. To create generational wealth, you have to be willing to, number one, sacrifice some of your current pleasure for future benefits. So you have to delay gratification, you have to wait to spend your money, and at some point, whatever you save will allow you to consume 10, 20, 50x more than whatever you can consume today. The way that the wealthy do this is they take advantage of how the financial system works. You can buy assets, borrow against them, never sell them, and you'll continue to be able to draw more and more money from those assets forever. One thing they have to understand about the wealthy is that they take advantage of how the financial system works. They learn the rules and then they play within them and they use them to their own benefit. So, what the wealthy do is they buy assets that appreciate in value over time, they're scarce, and then they borrow a currency against those assets that they know will decrease in value over time. So, they buy, let's say, a house, and then they borrow US dollars against that house. They know that over time, the value of the US dollar that they're borrowing is decreasing. So, in a way, they're taking a short position against the US dollar. When you take a short position against a certain asset, what you're doing is you're benefiting from its downside. So, as the US dollar loses purchasing power over time, the wealthy people who own the assets like the real estate, the stocks, they benefit from that depreciation because when they pay back the loan, the money that they pay back is worth less than whenever they got the money in the first place. So the asset that they own will continue to appreciate in value over time, while that loan that they take on against that asset will continue to decrease in value over time. This is a really great way to make sure that you never have to give away your assets. And you can do this with Bitcoin now. So, what you can do is you can buy Bitcoin, you can find a financial institution that's willing to lend you money against that Bitcoin, and then you can spend that money on your lifestyle. What this does for you is it gives you that asset where you get the future growth of that asset, but you also get to enjoy your life today because you're extracting some of the value out of that asset and you're bringing it to the present without having to sell that asset. The greatest thing here is that you never have to sell the asset and you never have to pay capital gains taxes if your Bitcoin has appreciated in value over time. Keep in mind that a loan isn't income, so you don't have to pay taxes on the cash flows that you receive from your Bitcoin being used as collateral. I built a spreadsheet here just giving you some criteria of what you could potentially do to build generational wealth. This is similar to the plan that I'm trying to follow. So let's say, for example, you expect to work until 2050. You plan to keep a gap of $300 between your expenses and your income. So your the difference here would be $300. Let's say you're earning $3,300 per month. You're spending 3,000. That $300 would be invested. Let's say your current expenses are $5,000 a month, and you'll see why I'm mentioning this in a little bit. You're expecting your expenses to rise at 5% per year. Your maximum LTV, and I'll explain what this means, is 20% on the entire portfolio. And finally, you're expecting a 25% compound annual growth rate for Bitcoin, and that's going to keep going forever because the way that I see it, the US dollar can continue to lose value forever. It can continue to lose 25%, then another 25%, then another 25% year after year after year. So let's start with what exactly LTV is. So LTV is your loan, so the amount of money that you borrow against an asset divided by the value of that asset. So let's say you have 5 Bitcoin worth $440,000. Your loan that you could take on against that asset to take a 50% LTV would be $220,000. So if Bitcoin's price right now is $88,100, you can see here 5 Bitcoin will give you a loan for $220,000 if you go 20% LTV. One of my criteria there was that you keep your LTV below 20%. So let me show you what that would look like. If your LTV stays at 20%, you could borrow $88,000 against your 5 Bitcoin. So technically, you could take on a loan of 1 Bitcoin against your entire stack. The reason why you want to keep your LTV as low as possible, this could go up to 100%. So if your loan is the same value as your Bitcoin collateral, you'd see 100% for your LTV. And at that point, you'd probably get liquidated. Your lender would sell your asset to pay off the loan so that they can make themselves whole again. This is what that would look like. So you take on a loan of $440,000. Your collateral is $440,000, 100% LTV. The reason why it's so important that you understand what LTV is because this is what determines whether or not your Bitcoin is going to get liquidated by your lender. Lenders are going to monitor your loan and your Bitcoin stack to make sure that your LTV stays below a certain percentage where they'll start liquidating you. So the LTV that I've seen with most lenders where they start liquidating you is at 80%. What this means is if you borrow 80% of your Bitcoin collateral, they will start liquidating you. They'll start selling some of your Bitcoin to pay off your loan to bring your LTV back down. So in our case here, let's say 1 Bitcoin is worth $88,000. You use 1 Bitcoin as collateral. You take on a loan for $18,000. The price of Bitcoin will have to drop to $22,032 for your LTV to go to 80%. And at that point, your lender will start selling some of your Bitcoin to pay off part of your loan. I've made other videos with more details on this. I'll link those videos at the end of this video, but your goal is to make sure your LTV stays as low as possible so your lender never has to liquidate you. To lower your LTV, either you take on a smaller loan or you add more Bitcoin as collateral. So let's say, for example, you take on a loan for this amount, $44,000 against 1 Bitcoin. It gives you an LTV of 50%. What would happen here is if Bitcoin's price drops to this level here, $55,000, your lender would start selling some of your Bitcoin to pay off your loan. And what you could do is one of two things if you want to avoid getting liquidated. Number one, you could add more collateral. So let's say you have another Bitcoin, you go from 1 Bitcoin to 2 Bitcoin as collateral, and you can see your LTV immediately drops by half because you doubled the amount of Bitcoin collateral that you have. The other way to do this would be to pay off some of your loan. So let's say, for example, if you pay off $5,000 of this loan, you bring the loan amount down to $39,000, your LTV immediately drops as well. The most important thing that you have to understand here is that over time, if you don't get liquidated, you're going to see your LTV continue to drop forever because the interest rate on your loan will very likely be lower than the growth rate on your Bitcoin. In column C, I tried to show that. So you can see here in 10 years, if Bitcoin grows at 25% per year, your Bitcoin would be worth $820,000, the price of Bitcoin. So if you're paying 11.9% in interest on your loan would have gone from $44,000 to $135,000. The dollar value would have gone up, but you can see here, the LTV would have decreased, meaning it's less likely that you get liquidated. And in this case, I copied the same formula from column D for this first example where you borrow 1 Bitcoin into column E to see what would happen in the next 10 years. So where would Bitcoin's price have to go for you to get liquidated? Because your current LTV is at 50%, Bitcoin's price would have to drop to 55,000. So it would drop about 37%. If your LTV is at 16.53%, you can see here, Bitcoin's price would have to drop from 820,000 all the way down to $170,000 per coin. The higher your LTV, the less Bitcoin's price has to fall in order for you to start getting liquidated. So in this first example, it has to drop 37.5% from the current price. In this second example, it has to drop about 80% from the price at this time for you to get liquidated. So again, let me just repeat that. The higher your LTV, the more likely you are to get liquidated. To lower your LTV, you either have to wait for Bitcoin to appreciate, you can add more Bitcoin as collateral, or you can pay back some of your loan and you'll see your LTV decrease. So now that you know what LTV means, let's go back to the spreadsheet. I took all of these assumptions and I put them into the compound interest calculator and I brought the data into column D. You can see here from column D all the way till column P, there's some new information here. You can see 2050, the Bitcoin price will be $23 million, you will stop buying Bitcoin at that point. So you'd have 0.41 Bitcoin, 41.7 million Satoshis. The value would be $9.7 million at that point. In column H, you see your annual expenses, the amount that you need to spend to survive. And over time, you can see the number keeps increasing. It went from $60,000 in the first year to $203,000 in 25 years from now. And in column J, you see your entire stack, the value of your entire stack divided by your expenses. What this shows you is how many years of expenses you have. So in this case, 47 years of your expenses are paid for because your stack is worth $9.7 million. Your expenses are $203,000. So $9.7 million in savings divided by $203,000 in annual expenses equals to 47.88 years. Now, keep in mind, if you paid for these expenses by selling some of your Bitcoin, you'd have to pay taxes, first of all. So you'd be selling a lot more Bitcoin. And over time, you'd be drawing down your Bitcoin balance. And it probably won't last generations. While fiat currencies survive, you can borrow against this Bitcoin stack. You're going to use 20% of your Bitcoin as collateral. So in this case, you'd be using 8.3 million Satoshis as collateral. And you can almost look at this like a line of credit. So let's say the lender gives you a 50% LTV loan on this Bitcoin. So your Bitcoin is always going to be worth 8.3 million Satoshis, but over time, the fiat loan that your lender is willing to give you will continue to increase. So you can see here, column L, in 2050, it would be 972,000. In 2051, it'll be 1.2 million, 2052, 1.5 million, 2053, 2054, 2055, 2056, it'd be 3.7 million, and so on. It'll keep increasing until in 2064, it's at 22 million, and it'll keep rising because the value of Bitcoin will continue to rise as well. So now what you see in column M is the amount of money that you borrow. So let's say you borrow $203,000 to pay for your expenses in that first year. You're going to have to pay interest on that. And over time, that amount will accumulate. So in column M, what I did was I chose a lower interest rate. I think that interest rates for Bitcoin backed loans will go down. Right now, they may be 9 to 12%, but in the future, I think they'll probably drop to mid to low single digit interest rates. So let's say we go with a little higher of an interest rate. We already have them available, but over time, as more competition comes to the market, you're going to see this rate drop. So in column M, I just calculated what your cumulative loans would look like. So if you pay for your expenses 1 year, then the next year, then the next year, and you keep borrowing against your Bitcoin collateral, what this would look like. And you can see in column N, the amount of the loan that's available for you to borrow after you've borrowed to pay for your expenses. So let's just go through 2050 quickly. A 50% LTV loan on that would be $972,000, but you're only borrowing $203,000. So your loan available is $769,000. Over time, even though you're borrowing more and more money, you can see here that the amount of the loan available is increasing. And what that means is your LTV continues to decrease, even though you're borrowing more and more money every single year. In the first few years, it increases, but then over time, the growth in Bitcoin takes over. And you see here, it goes to a maximum of 57.66%. And this is in year 2055. And then after 2055, it keeps coming down and it keeps coming down because compounding kicks in and your stack starts growing way faster than your expenses are accumulating. You can see here in 2050, your stack would have grown by about $2.4 million. In 2051, it would have grown by about $3 million. In 2052, it would have grown by almost $4 million, and so on. So let's just recap that strategy. What you're going to do is you're going to stack Bitcoin for the next 25 years until 2050. You're going to buy $300 worth every single month, no matter what. No matter what the news tells you, no matter what social media tells you, you're going to maintain your expenses and you're going to maintain the same standard of living over time and you're going to see your expenses go up. That's going to happen no matter what. You're going to take on a maximum 20% LTV loan on your entire portfolio and you're going to assume a 25% growth rate on your Bitcoin. So you're going to accumulate, let's say 41.7 million Satoshis in that time. In 25 years, that'd be worth $9.7 million. You're going to use 20% of that as collateral, and you're almost going to use it like a line of credit. You're going to borrow against it whenever you need to. You've already spent the time stacking Bitcoin. Now you have that asset base that you can draw down from, you can keep borrowing from, you can keep borrowing from it literally forever. At some point, if you want to, you can pay some of it off. You can pay it off with less Bitcoin than what you would have sold to pay for those expenses in the first place. And just to illustrate that last point a little bit better, I added a column P where you can see here the amount of Satoshis that are required to pay back your loan. In the first year, it's 1.7 million. Second year, it's 2.9 million. Third year, it's 3.8 million. And again, like I said before, compounding kicks in and you start seeing the amount of Satoshis that are required to pay back your loan decreasing. And again, this is assuming that Bitcoin keeps growing. I personally think it will. I don't think that'll be a problem. We just don't know when it'll grow. We don't know how long it'll grow for. We don't know if there's going to be a massive amount of front loaded returns. I'm just assuming here that it'll have this trajectory that'll continue for a very long time. As long as fiat currencies exist, you can keep doing this because it means that the world is willing to accept fiat currencies in exchange for goods and services. And that means that you never have to sell your Bitcoin. You never have to give away your Bitcoin to pay for your expenses. And you can use that Bitcoin to build generational wealth. You can keep that Bitcoin in your family literally forever by borrowing against it, and you never have to give it away in order to pay for your lifestyle. People will tell you that Bitcoin doesn't have any cash flows, so what's the value? But I just showed you what the value is. You can borrow against your Bitcoin, and you know that over time, your Bitcoin is going to grow much, much faster than whatever the interest rate on your loan is. So use this strategy to your advantage. Of course, I don't know what's going to happen to Bitcoin in the short term, the medium term. I think it'll go up over the long term, but this should be more like a plan for you. If you can save more than $300 a month, then of course, do that. Don't wait for Bitcoin's price to come to you. Set your own future. If you put more money into Bitcoin, you'll get to that amount of Satoshis that are required to let you borrow against it and be financially free much, much sooner. While you're on your journey, I highly recommend that you check out my private community. There's a free personal finance basics course. This course is included for anyone with the trial. You can use this to apply the wealth building formula to your own life. It'll help you with finding ways to spend less money and to earn more money. The link is in the pinned comment below. So stack as much Bitcoin as you can over the next few years, and you're going to see that you've created generational wealth for yourself, your kids, your grandkids, your great grandkids, multiple generations into the future.